my goal this evening is basically just to give you a kind of a brief overview of some of the elements which I think make up a successful interview. First of all, confession is that after kind of working quite hard at school and going to university in Switzerland and the UK, doing a postgraduate diploma, when I went along to my first interviews, I must confess I was pretty bad. I was pretty atrocious. And I think that a lot of people here, I would imagine, invest a lot of time and effort and money into their education. But actually, when it comes down to it, going for that job interview, so much relies on those 30 minutes, 1 hour, whatever it is that you're faced with. And it kind of staggers me that people really don't practice and prepare enough for this very important interview that could change their lives, earn them money and change their lives. So just as a general thing, hands up if you've had an interview. So pretty much everyone. Keep your hands raised if you've practiced or had a role play or any training for an interview. So a couple of people. So basically what I do at Interview Sensei, which is part of EGOTAN, which I've been doing for about 3 months now, is training people to take an interview. And most of these people so far have been Japanese candidates who are going along for an interview, maybe with a global company. And all we do is kind of give them a role play. We customize their resume. We try and match the needs of the employer to their qualifications. And in a role play, we give them a chance to kind of get things wrong, to practice, to make mistakes, to get feedback, and to watch themselves on a DVD record. So hopefully they can go away and improve. So basically, as you've all had interviews before and are all experts, I'd like to give you a brief little interview quiz. Okay? I'd like you to work on this maybe with your partner, somebody next to you. Could you... Okay? I called this brief talk 7 steps to interview success, because 7 seems like a good lucky number. And I have 7 slides and there are 7 questions. And I'm not the 7th son of a 7th gypsy king or anything like that. There's no kind of weird little lucky. First of all, I thought about the kinds of interviews I've had in my life. And you know, of course, there's an employment interview, and there's maybe an educational interview. I was thinking more of employment interviews, but what kind of interviews have you had? And what kind of interviews has anyone had? Anyone would like to talk about a couple, or, you know, I mean like one-on-one, you know, manager.
Yeah, a huge board of people, very far back in the room, on my own, and very nervous, sort of belittling.
Okay, so a panel of people. You know, you could have a group interview where there's like yourself and 3 or 4 other candidates with the panel, or just, as you just described, yourself and the big panel. Any other kind of interviews?
Scenario-based.
Okay, yeah. How does that work?
Again, sort of like a group interview with other people. You met them.
Right.
You walk in and they say, okay, you're going to be the brand manager for body shop, body shop in Japan or something.
Right.
How do you do it?
Okay, yeah, very good. Kind of behavioural or scenario interviews. Of course, you have telephone interviews. Perhaps to save money or just to identify if you're a good candidate for a face-to-face interview. I had the interview from hell once. Way back, I forget what year, in the mid-80s, I was applying for a job with a political party in the UK. And I had a 3-day residential interview, which involved, you know, personal one-to-one interviews, panel interviews, doing a group task, and of course dinner, you know, and it was amazing. Some people, you know, I was like gently sipping my wine. No, I won't finish the bottle just yet. And but some of the people, you know, on every table was an interviewer assessing us, and like one guy was picking arguments all the time, you know, and I thought, no, he's not going to make it, and he didn't. So there are many kinds of interviews you can face, but the first step and I think this is the most important step of all, is research the company. It is such an obvious, but I've been doing interview practice for the last 3 months now with about 5 to 10 people a week, going for fairly, high-powered jobs. This is like a real role play for a job. I have been amazed how few people actually know very much about the position, the company, or the environment of which this company operates. And it is so easy these days. You just go onto the website. And for non-native speakers, going onto the English website, I think it's great, because it kind of gives you the vocabulary, the key buzzwords of the company that you can actually use or recycle when you interview. If they haven't got a website, perhaps they're a small company, I don't know if they have an HR department you could ring or contact, or ask some friends if they know about the company. But there's so many ways to actually find out. And I think it's the number one most important step, and it's the number one most important thing that will impress your interviewer by knowing the company. Okay? Let's look at question number 2 on your worksheet. There's 3 common interview questions you might expect to be asked. Now, if you pick up any kind of book on interviews or go to any website, commonly asked questions, what kind of questions, or in your own experience, what questions always come up? Who are you? Who are you? Okay.
Why this company?
Why this company? Yeah, good one. Always comes up. Why are you applying for this job? Why this company? Is it any job you're looking for, or this particular company? Any others?
Strengths and weaknesses?
Strengths and weaknesses, a really good one, yeah. Always, every interview I've been to, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses? How would you summarise these? One of the things when I mentioned about going for this political job interview, I actually passed the interview, whether that was good or bad, I'm not sure. But one of the things we were always taught in this political job was always talk about things in 3s. So if you're going to talk about your strengths, always talk about 3 strengths, 1 weakness, 3 strengths, 1 weakness. Yeah, but strengths and weaknesses, always a very common question. Anything else? Any other questions? Sorry? What's your objective? Yeah. What's maybe your career objective, or why do you want this job? Yeah. What are your achievements? Yeah. Usually the interview will follow a bit of small talk. Hello. How are you today? Is it still raining? Followed by educational qualifications, then going into professional background. Then it might be the behavioural, what if, strengths and weaknesses, and so on. And then perhaps any questions you'd like to ask me. It follows a regular flow. I mean, probably in major companies, these people interview hundreds of candidates, so they kind of have a scenario or a little system of flowing down. So, the main point I wish to make is that step number 2 is like the good Boy Scout in the UK or the US, prepare and practice. Review the qualifications on your resume and see how they match the needs of the job. Review the most common interview questions, and in your own mind, know what you're going to say. I mean, just practice in your own mind. If you don't have a kind of suitable role play person you can practice with. And also kind of be aware of your body language. Not just the verbal responses you're making, but do you do things with your hands? Do you look away, or do you nod, or do you rock back and forth? Be aware of this. So practice how you're going to act and what you're going to say. Okay?